How's it going, everyone? I'm Bert.
And I'm Fonx.
And this
Bert and Fonx. Science fiction. Why does everybody like it so much? It's one of the biggest genres of
all time, really.
I think almost everybody that I know that is into fiction of some sort has some subgenre of science fiction that they like.
Right.
Why do people like it so much? What do you think? What do you think it is?
Well, my personal opinion is that science fiction, and part of the reason I think science fiction even exists, is that it's almost a form of escapism from stuff that is current and happening now, because we're always dreaming of like this better future or distant planets. You know, I'm not stuck here. I can go anywhere. I can do anything. I can take a spaceship to the ends of the universe. It's like the ultimate form of exploring.
Yeah, but
like there's a lot of different reasons I think people can like science fiction.
Hold on, though. What about dystopian? Because that's not a better future, or that's not like really. So as you say, you're saying projecting through a better idea of what the future is,
or a different idea,
escaping reality. I think dystopia is the complete opposite of that. It's actually a call to reality, to a really harsh one that is not desired by anybody. It's the opposite of utopia. So how would you characterize that side of science fiction?
For me personally, what I see like a dystopian future situation being is that people projecting about dystopian futures are, one, like you're saying, it's like a call to action of if we don't change things, this is how it's going to be. But it's also still a form of escapism. And that's because in a dystopian future, is like a zombie apocalypse, or however you want to say it, it's always about people with this ideal self of, I'm going to be a lone wolf. I'm going to be able to do whatever I want. I'm not going to have to conform to the constraints of society anymore because it's been broken down. It doesn't exist. It's just me in the world exploring the rubble of the stuff that's oppressing me.
That's where you and I differ completely then. So
probably,
because you and I come together in liking science fiction, but we completely differ there because I would argue that dystopia is not really the zombie apocalypse. It's 1984. It's Gattaca. It's something that brings you to a reality of a really shitty future.
Right.
And there may or may not be the whole let's change it message, or it might just be dwelling on projecting what an author sees we might become, you know.
Right.
And it might be a very pessimistic, dark vision of the future. And to underline that, why don't we go back to the origin of science fiction? And I've got like a Wikipedia pulled up here because there's a couple of interesting things that I wanted to note. And it actually says here, science fiction is difficult to define precisely as it includes a wide range of concepts and themes, as you and I just highlighted in this conversation. And I really like this quote that says, James Blish wrote, Wells, and we're talking about H.G. Wells. So for us, I don't know if you agree, for me, the fathers of science fiction as a genre, beyond fantasy or horror, which it pulls from also, would be H.G. Wells and Jules Verne.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
From what I think. And so Wells says here, he used the term originally. So apparently Wells used the term science fiction. Was one of the first to use it. I didn't know that. I just learned that. Used the term originally to cover what we would today call hard science fiction, in which a conscientious attempt to be faithful to already known facts, as of the date of writing, was a substrate on which the story was to be built. And this is what I love. Here's the part that I love. It says, and if the story was also to contain a miracle, it ought at least not to contain a whole arsenal of them. So I really like this, that it's kind of like a definition of good, believable, not believable, but something that will let you do suspension of disbelief and get you sucked in.
Right, exactly. It's just part of good storytelling. Really.
Right. So, but also the part of the genre that just explains that you build on known facts. That's the part that I really like. You build on known facts, and you have a couple of things that just like fly out of there.
Exactly.
Without being an arsenal of them. So I really like that, you know.
Which, as we all know, there are plenty of things that really just go whole hog. and just throw a bunch of stuff at you.
And again, we're talking about what's called hard, and it's in quotes here, hard science fiction.
Right.
Because, like I can say, so for example, when I was a kid, like I liked the Flash Gordon comics, and those were already vintage.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, they were already vintage. But I kind of came across a big Flash Gordon collection at a House of Friends or something. I read all of them. And, talk about an arsenal of miracles. I mean, there's all kinds of crap there that are all over the place. So I guess, it's been taken from that original concept, which is very much the formula of H.G. Wells' stuff.
Right.
So like The Island of Dr. Moreau, what other things, The Invisible Man. Like, what science fiction do you remember of him? Because I remember The Island of Dr. Moreau right now.
Of Wells?
But I remember more, Jules Verne. I remember more like Travel to the Moon and like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Right. Oh, that's H.G. Wells. Yes, that's very good.
So
yes.
we're talking Jules and H.G. Wells and Verne and Journey to the Center of the Earth. That would be a big one that really stuck out for me because this whole idea that's even carried through to a couple different things nowadays of this like hollow Earth concept of like there's something else within the Earth.
There's another world inside.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, I mean, talk about pulling a miracle. Like, so that's kind of like but it's interesting because now that I think of it, it does have just the one miracle.
Yeah.
So that's the one miracle. Everything else adjusts to known facts, as he says. So that's a great definition of his. Oh, the time machine.
The time machine is such a good one.
And time travel is one of the subgenres of science fiction.
Not to mention, I'm really a fan of when they, what year was it? Was it 2006, 2008? I'll have to look that up. But when they did the time travel, the time machine movie.
Well, see, I saw the one from the 50s.
Right. So I'm talking about the one from like the 2000s.
Which is very good, by the way. You should watch that one.
The 50s one?
Yeah, even though the effects are like something we've outgrown. The narrative is really good.
Well, I mean, even the original Star Wars, the effects, or Star Trek, is something that we've outgrown. But I mean, it's still like good to go back and watch.
But I mean, Star Trek is way beyond the time machine I'm talking about.
Of course, yeah.
But anyway, you were saying about the time machine in 2008.
Or whenever the actual date is. But yeah, no, I just really appreciated the way that they did that movie because of the way that they handled utilizing more modern effects, but with older looking technology as far as that was concerned. So like the time machine in that one almost looks like this steam engine thing the guy has to like pull the lever on, and it's got this big gyroscope around it.
It has to be steampunky because of when H.G. Wells wrote the story.
Exactly.
So it's actually responding to the look and feel of H.G. Wells' world.
Right.
So even the version of the 60s, the one that I've watched, the original, I don't know if it's the original one, but to me it is because it's the oldest one I can think of right now.
Right.
That one is also steampunky. I mean, it's not in the 50s, but the machine is the same one you described.
Right.
We might be talking about the same movie, actually, and you just think it was made in 2008.
No, it definitely was not.
Okay, so then 2008 is a remake from Hollywood, which they do a lot because legally it's easy for them to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just reprinting money, essentially.
Right, but the original one is 50s. I'm going to say 50s, not 60s, because 60s things start getting interesting in the 60s, and we'll get to that. But first, I wanted to talk about the movie that brought us together in terms of science fiction, which is Star Wars. Right?
Oh my, that was an interesting day. The movie that brought us together, Star Wars.
Well, I mean, we didn't become friends because of the movie Star Wars, but once we were friends,
the first time that it got brought up between us, like, oh man, what do you think of Star Wars?
Yeah. So you trying to tell the story?
No, please feel free to.
No, why don't you tell it?
Okay. So it's the first time we've ever brought this up, and we're in each other's company, and we're talking about our mutual love for science fiction. I was like, oh yeah, like, man, I really love Star Wars, and he just looks at me and he goes, fuck Star Wars. I'm like, immediately in the back of my mind, like, that's one of my criteria for like having friends. I'm like, would you just say about Star Wars? But yeah, so that was an interesting day for you to just look at me and be like, fuck Star Wars.
And let's start clarifying. So let's talk about Star Wars for a little bit. So
yes, please.
You know that I did watch Star Wars in 1976, I think, when it came out.
Right, the first time it came out in theaters.
So there was lines around the block for weeks on end. I think it was maybe months. And if I find a picture, I'm going to post that. And I have to say with pride that I was like 13 or barely 12, I think. And back then I was like, I'm not going to stand in line for any movie. I don't care how cool it is. And that looked cool.
That's a big difference between us already.
That was, dude, I'm not sitting in a queue. I'm not sitting in line for anything.
I have queued up for many things that are
sitting in line
stupid.
For medicine and food for my daughter.
Those are good things to line up for.
Not to watch a movie. If I can watch it later without standing in line, just like I did, walk in with my friends, sit down comfortably and watch a movie, take it all in. But anyway, there was a huge marketing campaign around it, and it was a revolutionary science fiction movie. I loved it back in the day.
Right.
So when I told you fuck Star Wars, it's because like it had been 40 years since Star Wars, and Star Wars was almost a cult.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and it's like you're supposed to select Star Wars.
It almost is now. It's almost its own religion now. I mean, there are people that practice like the actual like ways of the Jedi now.
So that's bullshit to me. That's total bullshit. I love storytelling. I love science fiction.
Right.
Cultism, I have no time for. None. So then let's get into that for a little bit. Too.
Yeah.
So what really, really did great on my ass, well, we're not going to dwell on that part too much, but I just want to say that, it's just like that you're supposed to like Star Wars. You're not supposed to like anything.
Yeah, if you're a fan of science fiction, you're supposed to, well, I mean, it's also a big controversy. So I would say that there is some semblance of reality where it's like, yeah, you're supposed to like Star Wars, but what I hear like most emphatically across like the geek culture or the nerd culture of like people that really enjoy Star Wars, who live and breathe it as a genre and everything, is that a lot of people are on like, you either fell in love with Star Wars or you fell in love with Star Trek.
Yeah, but that's
and then a lot of people like both of them, like myself. I enjoy both, but if you didn't like one, you would have liked the other, and it's like one of those two things where like people's origins a lot.
So I start from a point of view of like, if you're supposed to like something, that's just the opposite of cool.
Well, first of all, question it.
But it's the opposite of cool. So all these dweebs in the corporate world where you and I have had to work that call themselves the Stormtroopers and the Ewoks and the Stargazers and
all those stupid
Star Jerkers. I don't have any time for that shit.
Project Skywalker.
And so I don't want to belong to a geek culture.
Right.
And that's why I got kicked out of the punk culture too. Because I don't want to belong to a sect. I don't think anybody should. I think it's great to talk about these things, and it's great to fall in love with shit.
Well, and have that sense of community that comes along with those things too.
Yeah, but not,
because that's why a lot of people do these things.
But not too much. It's kind of like the whole Gibson and Fender. When you said the whole Star Trek, Star Wars thing,
right?
And I don't want to go back to the music, but it's the whole. Are you a Gibson guy or are you a Fender guy? That's cool,
right?
For stupid bar shit, but it's just
like an icebreaker conversation thing.
It's a joke. It's a joke. If you take it beyond joke, then it really becomes pathetic. So that's kind of where I'm coming from there. But let's go back to Star Wars. So Star Wars was a revolution in the way science fiction was told, in my opinion, and
Absolutely.
I think in everybody's opinion back at the time. It made winks to all kinds of subgenres. It brought in things from the Western movies. It brought in things from the samurai movies.
Yeah, it did.
It brought in a lot of science fiction. It had tons of winks to everything. So C-3PO is the policewoman in Metropolis by Fritz Lang. I don't know if you've noticed that.
What?
Think about it. It's up.
I guess you're right.
It's not. But see, no, they did it very much on purpose.
Yeah.
And then have a compliment.
I've just never actually thought of it that way. But
yeah. And then I think R2 is also inspired in it. I think in the one from, I'm blanking out. It'll come back to me. A 50s series.
Sure. Well, he's almost like a buddy cop in a way.
Yeah, but it's also, I think it reminded me when it came out. It reminded me of the Daleks of Doctor Who.
Oh yeah.
I saw R2. And
to be fair, the original effects of that were piloted much the same way as the Daleks.
I think so. It was very purposefully full of winks, and we will get into a second in Jodorowsky's Dune, because there's a lot of inspiration that comes from that seminal movie. We'll talk about that in a second.
Sure, yeah.
But it had all these very different things that it kind of strayed a little bit from the previous science fiction that I thought we were accustomed to seeing was more Flash Gordon. Buck Rogers is that the other guy? The previous
Buck Rogers was being another one, and that's the same time as the original, or just after that was the original Battlestar Galactica series, which drew a lot from that as well, too.
Right, but that was after Star Wars, so it has a lot of that. But before that, so the Flash Gordon thing is what I was trying to get at is a lot of tubular, bulby, it's all light bulbs and stuff. It's all based on with lots of beeps and. and a lot of people dressed like Romans, like in togas and stuff. So there's a lot of weird stuff like that, and some of it was cool, but it didn't have all that aspect of adventure, and it didn't have that grit. So one of the things that I really liked that I still like about science fiction is, you know, when I was a kid, we imagined the year 2000 I didn't imagine, but a lot of the depictions of the year 2000 was people dressed in like silvery, shiny stuff.
Oh yeah, it looks like the back of a CD or something like that.
Right, and everybody's still wearing denims from the 1950s. So what I like real good science fiction, like, you know, in Star Wars, where there's gritty and worn out stuff, you know, and then like in Alien, for example, or Aliens, where like
that's the best use
Ripley
of like
wears
the
like
old school tech
and everybody's
yeah.
So it's kind of more realistic where you have things from the past that have transcended into that world, and things from the future. So that's kind of the thing that I saw in Star Wars, and I'm going to get into a couple of things in a second. But I wanted you to bring. Is there anything there that you disagree with that I've said?
Well, I think for me, the big thing with Star Wars is that obviously I wasn't even born when the first one was released. I wasn't born until 89.
That's right, I remember.
And so I was introduced to it later down the road.
It was cool.
You watched it before I was born.
Yeah.
But I was introduced to it later in life, but my parents were both fans of Star Wars. And so my dad let me watch those movies on VHS a long time ago. And this is before they even did like the remakes, or not the remakes, but like the prequel series they did, like episodes 1, 2, and 3, technically.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, it's like the first ones, it was like the Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then it later became Star Wars: A New Hope.
Yeah.
And then it was episode 4 of 6 or 9. And, you know, so it's like, it's only up until like now, we're actually like this year that we're recording this, we're getting the final of the whole.
I started disengaging, like, you know, with the Return of the Jedi, like it started getting old to me, like really old. It started to feel like a franchise, you know, and I started to lose interest there. But it's still, I mean, it holds, I understand that the art direction. So to this day, I enjoy watching the making of any Star Wars movie more than I enjoy watching
the actual movie itself.
Yeah, some of the latest ones are really boring, but the art direction is amazing.
I agree.
And so,
in fact, one of my favorite Star Wars movie, and anyone can feel free to talk to me about this after all of this is over, but my favorite Star Wars movie is actually the second one that was ever released, which is Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
And that was
pretty good. Yeah.
You know, the middle of the first trilogy. And that one's actually my favorite because it just has like this perfect blending of like the good guy, bad guy, a little bit of gray area, like you don't know who to really trust. Plus it had like really cool elements coming in from the outside. So like the introduction of like doing the bounty hunter stuff and some of the sets that they had, and like those AT-ATs on the planet Hoth, where it's just like these giant hulking machines and all kinds of really cool stuff.
Well, see, it's interesting that you say that because you've hardly mentioned anything that's particular science fiction. You've just seen the adventure and the fantasy part. So that, which
giant machines,
which knowing you is you know, it's not a surprise to me,
right?
And that's cool. That's cool. But what I'm saying is, you could find that in other genres of fiction.
True.
That are not necessary. And granted, Star Wars has that, and it's pretty good. It's entertaining. It's a good story. I'm not detracting from any of that, but it's interesting because, you know, I like the production design. Personally, I like the production design and the worlds, the imagination of those worlds, and, you know, the alien people, the design of some of the stuff that's foreign to us, the design that's not foreign to us, and how they propose that it's evolved. All that kind of stuff is cool to me.
Yeah.
The different species. So apart from all the things that you say, which are definitely very cool, and it's interesting because not very long ago, I watched George Lucas's first movie, which also is a science fiction movie. It's called THX. It is THX, right? That's the name of his company, right?
Yes.
So his company's named after his first film.
Well, not Lucasfilms anymore, but yes.
So yeah, but I don't know if it's Lucasfilms, but THX is it's a distributor or something else.
Well, right now THX is a sound company.
Okay, so
sound engineering company.
So that's what I'm talking about. So there is a company that he has funded. Okay. That is called THX, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it's named after his first movie, THX. That I know, and I just wanted to make sure it was THX and not TXH because I always get those wrong. But so that movie is really interesting because it's done with very, very few means. Very few means.
Yeah.
It's backed by Francis Ford Coppola. You know who that is?
Yes.
Okay. No less. So he's a beginner. So George is a beginner filmmaker, but he already has the backing of somebody like Francis Ford Coppola. So he's gone to film school. He's shown his shit. Like there's people that believe in him.
Yeah, they know he's got the chops.
Yeah. And he does this dystopian movie. It has nothing to do with Star Wars.
I actually have not ever seen this movie.
You should watch it. It's so good, and it has Robert Duvall amongst others.
Ooh.
So, yeah. It's so amazing, and it's done with very, very few means. So it's a stark contrast with Star Wars, not just in genre selection, but also in subgenre, I should say. So Star Wars is like a saga kind of thing, and THX is a dystopian story. It's also the effects are very gritty. It's not, but it's done really well. It's done very smartly. So it's a great way to show what a good filmmaker is. And if I were you, I'd watch it and it goes back to what you're saying. The story is good.
Right.
The story is told really, really well, and it has all these weird things. It has this religion, this strange religion, and it's it's very funky. So I'm going to just drop it here, but it's a great, great movie, and it's a good way to show.
Would you say a lot of that fed like the way that he did that first movie? Do you see similarities between that and then what he brought over into Star Wars?
He didn't bring anything over into Star Wars from that I saw.
Okay.
The only thing he brought is knowing how to make movies and knowing how to tell a good story. That he did, and the production design. Yeah. Because cheap as it is, THX is very good production design. And it's not that cheap, but I mean...
Well, it's not cheap anymore, but...
You can tell... No, what I'm saying is when he did it...
Right.
It wasn't that cheap to do. I mean, he had a certain budget to do it, but it was certainly not Star Wars. And he may do, very interestingly. So if anybody likes science fiction that's listening, if anybody's listening, you probably like science fiction if you stayed this far.
Oh, hopefully.
I really encourage you to watch that movie because it's a great, great... And if you like filmmaking, period, you should watch that movie too because it's just a great showcase of how a beginner filmmaker that knows his shit, let's put it that way, make something work really well. And it's a great movie. And now, from that, I want to talk about Jodorowsky's Dune. Have you heard of that movie?
I have heard of it, but only because of you.
Okay.
So outside of you telling me about it before this, I had never heard about that before.
Great. So here's a recommendation for you from everybody who's listening that hasn't seen this movie. And I assume that somebody that's listening has seen it, more than one. More than the two that listen to our podcast. One of the two has probably heard of. Jodorowsky's Dune is a documentary that talks about a project by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll get to him in a second. A huge project that never got done. And how the people that he recruited, the creative team he recruited for that, went on to become part of Star Wars, Aliens, Blade Runner.
Yep.
And there's a fourth movie that I'm blanking out on. That I always blank out on, so I'm sorry about that. But the four, I'm going to say three, because I only mentioned three. I can't find the fourth one.
Right.
Three of the most seminal science fiction game changers in the 80s, in the early 80s. Again, Blade Runner, the Alien franchise, and the Star Wars franchise pulled from this movie. And I'm going to say, so before the internet, there was an underground culture. I believe that underground is part of nature. It just gets created. If it's not created, it creates itself. And it was very much in comic strips and fanzines, And so there was a huge following of comics, and when you were a kid, you would go to the kiosk and buy your comics, or you would steal them if you didn't have money like me. And,
Wait, you stole them?
Yeah. You just go there and sweep on, because, hey, because we didn't have money to buy them. When I had money, I would buy them,
Yeah.
And I wanted to get money to those guys. And, and one of the most influential, which I didn't like very much back in the day, that was huge, that resembles everything in Star Wars, was this series drawn by Moebius, spelling on screen, I'm going to say it for the listeners, Moebius.
Yes.
That's a nickname of a guy who can draw like no other. He was an architect, I believe, and he's just amazing how he draws. You know who's a fan? Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott's storyboards look like Moebius because Ridley Scott can draw like a motherfucker.
That's true,
If I find the stuff, I'm going to put it on screen. So his storyboards are just fucking amazing. Like Aliens, the whole look and feel of Aliens is already drawn out by Ridley before he
Well, aside from the actual
From the
alien
storyboards
itself, right?
No, when I'm So yes, of course, he worked with Geiger.
Geiger is the way that I've pronounced it, but I'm not sure if that's accurate either.
Yeah, well, let's go with Geiger. So Geiger is involved in Jodorowsky's Dune too. So anyway, so these two had a series, Jodorowsky and Moebius. Jodorowsky wrote the script.
Right.
Moebius did the drawing. Jodorowsky's a crazy motherfucker. Has amazing movies that are like trips on acid. Like one of them is, I can't remember now, The Holy Mountain. And this is content advisory. It's disturbing. If you go to YouTube and look at the Holy Mountain trailer, it's disturbing. But it's like a trip on acid. And this guy was just, this guy has been blowing people's minds since the 60s. Every single show he did, he comes from theater.
Right.
He's an amazing, I was subscribed to Facebook for a while to his feed. And I ended up turning him off because he had a second.
Oh my gosh!
All day.
I can't stand people like that. Or it's like literally everything just gets.
They were all amazing. They were all historical quotes. Every single last one. I mean, the guy's a genius. What I do recommend is watch Jodorowsky's Dune.
Okay.
They interview this guy throughout the movie, and he switches through 4 languages, so he has to be subtitled all the time because he's speaking French or English, or then he goes to Spanish, and he goes back to the guy is crazy. So at the time of that, the comic underground, these two guys had I think it was called the Incal, as in Inca, with an L at the end. The Incal. They had this comic series.
Okay.
So there's a shit ton of stuff that is very reminiscent of the Star Wars world.
Really?
Yeah. And it was written by Jodorowsky, who's this crazy guy. Like I said, he has like the Holy Mountain, and I don't remember his titles right now. I'm blanking up, but the guy he was just revolutionary in this stuff. And then this dude that could draw like no one's business, who could conjure these amazing worlds. And by the way, tip of the hat to the Boltman episode. Moebius has also a version of The Isle of the Dead.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ooh.
It's on screen now. Links in the description. So anyway, so this movie, Jodorowsky's Dune, talks about Jodorowsky wanted to do Dune.
Right.
Which later was done
which is huge.
By Bertolucci. Now I'm blanking up again. No, by what's his face? De Laurentiis. Dino De Laurentiis.
Yes.
That produced Dune. Dune is an amazing trilogy in books, and we're going to talk a little bit briefly about books and stuff. But these guys with money, with deep pockets, said, "You're so amazing, Jodorowsky, that we want to give you money to do whatever the fuck you want."
Right.
So he came up with this version of Dune that he was going to do. In his own words, was he wanted a trip on acid without the drug. That's the movie he wanted to make.
I was about to say, do whatever you want. A phrase that they would soon regret.
Well, no, it was amazing. This guy is amazing. I mean, you have to watch this movie. Anybody watching this needs to watch this movie. So
the documentary, not the actual movie.
Yes,
because the movie never got made.
Correct. Exactly. Yes. Thanks for that. The whole story is that Jodorowsky never got to make Dune because it was so out there.
Right.
It said that Hollywood just cowered out.
Right.
Because they made these storyboards of this book that was a leaf behind it that would take to every producer in Hollywood with these amazing drawings from Jodorowsky that reminisce Star Wars a lot. So like these are these sword fights that are like the Jedi look starts appearing there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you think they're pulling that from like
I know they are.
Asian culture with like the samurai?
Oh, the samurai. Yeah, of course they are.
Yeah,
but we know. Yeah, there's no. Well, before this, we need to talk about the Western culture. Like, if we get there really quick, I'll just make a quick mention.
Right.
A lot of these adventure stories pull from the Western genre, which in turn pulls from the samurai movies from the '60s.
Exactly.
Captain famously by Akira Kurosawa, but also by others. Like the Zatoichi series is just amazing. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Right.
Just to mention. And those guys, in turn, Kurosawa and all those guys were getting inspiration from the previous Western genre that has been done by John Huston and all this guy. So there's all this coming up, and so
it's like it's feeding back and forth.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So then Jodorowsky makes this team of creatives. He recruits people from all over the world, like these guys that do amazing illustrations for science fiction book covers. Right. He picks those guys. He picks Geiger, because he sees Geiger's Led Zeppelin album cover that he had designed. He says, this guy, I want this guy. He gets Salvador Dali. Watch the movie because I'm not getting into details, but Salvador Dali was a shit show.
Dang.
Because he likes to screw with people. And so he got Salvador Dali because he wanted him to play the emperor.
Really?
Yeah, you watch this movie. You're gonna love it. So, and then he got Geiger. He got, I don't remember who, Peter Sternbell, I think his name is Turnbull. who later went on to do Alien. So he got all these guys
to work on the Alien stuff. Yeah,
and like I said,
aside from Geiger.
Yeah. Oh, I think it could have been even 2001 with Kubrick. Don't quote me on that, but
okay,
it was something that fucking big. Okay,
right.
So he had all these people, and then the movie doesn't get made, so they all go looking for work elsewhere, and they go.
But they have all these
Star
ideas.
Wars, right? Well, first of all, they're just all really good, but then they've had like this pool. They've pooled together and they've interchanged all these concepts,
right.
And now they go and and Lucas goes on to do Star Wars, which looks a lot like a lot of this stuff. A lot,
really.
Yes, and then these other guys go to Alien. Those guys go to Blade Runner. So all this stuff gets just like disseminated. Remember?
Yes.
Etymology quickies. It all gets disseminated and becomes the seminal part of like what we know as science fiction to this day. So all the series that we're going to talk about now and all the cool stuff.
Right.
So that's what Jodorowsky's doing. Highly recommended. You are going to love it. You are going to love it.
I personally will probably love it, and I have a feeling that a lot of people who would be listening to us, who would also be interested in watching that, they would probably love it as well.
Yeah, if you like, so the description that I just read in the Wikipedia about science fiction was it's a speculative fiction. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Anybody that likes speculating on what could be, what would be, that's kind of what we're talking about. It's a futuristic type of fantasy. You're all going to get a kick out of this. And just, even if you like history or how the world works, you're going to love that too. So there's a little bit for everything in that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I recommend it to everybody that's listening. So, yeah. So, having said that, I'm talking about like all the big science fiction, how things cross-pollinate.
Right.
Let's go to, we wanted to talk about stuff that we believe are great influences.
Right. But big disclaimer here, just being honest.
Yeah.
There's no way that we're going to be able to cover everything at all, and certainly not even everything that we both like and appreciate from things. I mean, we could almost do separate episodes on books versus movies versus scripts,
comics.
Comics.
We talked about comics the other day. We said like we can't do it in an episode. It just won't cover the whole thing.
No.
So here's the good news though. If anybody that's listening wants to challenge us on something, if we've missed something, if we haven't mentioned something, if you think that something we've mentioned doesn't quite cover it, we want to hear all the abuse.
Yes. So for any of you, for example, watching this on YouTube, because there is a YouTube video version of this, make sure to let us know down in the comments below. For any of you listening on other podcast platforms, I know that on some of them it allows you to do comments for those particular podcast episodes. So just leave us comments. Let us know. We'd love to hear what you guys also think of science fiction and how it is relating to you, or how it's important to you, or things that we've missed. Like all of these things we know we're not going to be able to get to.
Yeah.
So
or if not, like shut the fuck up and stay at home. Okay. So,
okay. Maybe not quite that, but
no. But for real, if you want to engage, by all means, we would love that. So let's start with we already kind of covered. I got a list up here. We already kind of covered H.G. Wells and Jules Verne.
We did a little bit in the beginning. Yeah.
Maybe we should cap it with a couple thoughts. Maybe there.
I mean, first of all, Time Machine really popularizing time travel movies to the point where even like things like Terminator pulling inspiration from that, even to the look of how the whole sphere happens around the people that get teleported and transported, like when they did the movies for that.
Well, they're the origin of
sphere of like.
They're the origin of steampunk, like that whole subculture.
Yeah, exactly.
Started with these guys.
Well, I don't know if I'd say Terminator was steampunk, but.
No, not Terminator, but the look and feel of like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne,
which is its own subgenre.
Right. I even have I'm not a huge steampunk fan, but I was a huge Jules Verne fan. And I love Captain Nemo and the whole concept.
Right.
I mean, the fact that his name is nobody. Nemo he's just a mysterious person that just attracts himself for society.
Right.
There's a ton to relate to that from everybody that I love. I even I think on Jules Verne birthday one day, instead of doing something useful, I made myself an avatar where I looked like Captain Nemo. I mean, that's how much I love that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, like the Nautilus, like the whole... those concepts that preceded, because I mean, there's a ton of stuff in Voyage to the Moon that precedes the actual trips to the moon.
Yes.
And that's quite accurate. And the same with submarines. I mean, they kind of predicted I don't know.
Well, that's one of my favorite things is where... when people are writing science fiction, they're trying to predict, and this is just like in general, and I won't take too long on this, but just in general, people are trying to predict what technology is going to be like in the future. how sometimes and in many ways that can inspire a lot of the technologies that we have today, because they saw that and they're like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Right. Let's find a way to make that happen.
Right. And also going back to the whole hard science fiction concept of before, it's based on known facts. You're kind of projecting from known facts. So it stands to reason that it would be something that that is doable later if there's only one miracle, not an arsenal of them, you know?
Take, for example, tablets. Like the fact that we even have like iPads and tablets and all those kinds of things today, it was all because they were like, well, if people write down on a sheet of paper in the future, they'll write down on a screen that can just pick up like all of this stuff and it's digitally recorded. And I'm like, yeah, man, I know plenty of people that just actually carry a tablet around with them to use it like a pad of paper and take digital notes.
Right. Well, and a lot of things get inspired on. So I can't remember the title of this movie, and I hate myself for it, but it's a movie that now is really, really passé. But back in the day, it was pretty heavy, pretty culty.
Yeah.
And it has a scene where this guy's playing golf, and he hits a golf ball against a projection of a field. And when the ball hits the projection, it bounces off, but the ball continues in the projection.
Oh.
That exists today.
It does.
That is actually a thing that happens today. That was nothing when that movie came out. Everybody was like, that is such a good idea.
Right.
So I'm sure that idea stemmed, was the insemination of that other one. Stanislaw Lem. Have you heard of that guy?
No.
Okay, so
should I have?
Yeah, you should have.
Okay.
Well, this is more book science fiction, and it's pre-Star Wars, so I don't know if, it's really interesting. I don't know.
I mean, I'm always looking for recommendations to go back to, so please.
It's kind of math humor. So like if you know math, you laugh more with him. If you know science.
Okay.
So but he's very funny, and he has great stories. I mean, he has things like the pilot Pirx, I think is his name. Pilot Pirx. He has a series of a pilot, and he's called Pirx or Pirx because he's Eastern European. I don't remember now where he's from. I don't know if he's Polish or Bulgarian it's Czech. I don't remember.
Okay,
but he's Eastern European. I think Czech maybe. So Pirx the Pilot his stories are with Pirx, and he has some really, 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 really good ones, and they're super funny. But there's a lot of science jokes in there too.
Okay.
So you have to kind of pick up on that. But he has like stupid stuff. Like I remember one story that starts where he's like, there's a stain on his windshield in the ship, and the pilot Pirx is trying to wipe it down, and it keeps growing, and he doesn't get it. And then he realizes it's an asteroid that's coming to him. There's really stupid stuff there, but the guy knows a lot about science, so it's all intermixed with that, and like time paradoxes, and all kinds of like trajectory jokes, but it's all funny. And so I'm going to leave it there. If anybody
definitely go check it out.
He's one of the fathers of science fiction today.
Perfect.
Considered. So we will mention it later, but he is also an inspiration for some of the stuff in the Red Dwarf.
Oh yeah.
Which, if you remember, the Red Dwarf has a ton of links to all kinds of science.
All
jokes.
kinds of like all over the place.
Right. So that's that one. Ray Bradbury.
Yeah.
He is so cool. He has all these great stories. Remember that time we talked about the big rain, that planet where it rains all the time? He has these just crazy ideas.
I remember us talking about that. Could you tell it again though?
Yeah, so it's a story. He has a bunch of short stories, and they're all collected in a compendium that they made a movie of called The Illustrated Man.
Oh,
This is about a guy that has tattoos, but he gets really mad if you say they're tattoos. He says they're illustrations on the skin, and they have this power that if you look at them too much, they suck you in and they tell you a story.
That's cool.
It's really good. And so all of the short stories come from the illustrations in this man's skin.
Like he's literally a walking book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look it up on YouTube. There's a couple of trailers or scenes that you can see. He's also the author of Fahrenheit 451. You heard of that?
Oh yeah.
Dystopian movie.
Oh yeah.
So Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which paper burns. And that's why that story is titled this.
They actually just did a remake of that film.
Another remake.
Yes.
So I've read the book and I watched the original, I think, 70s film. Really good, too, about a dystopian society where books are prohibited.
Right.
And in my opinion, we're getting close. That's more stuff about Ray Bradbury, the Martian Chronicles. The Martian Chronicles is famous short stories, too.
Yeah. Actually, those ones I think I've read.
Okay, because those are really and interesting. And now I'm blanking out. There's a couple other like really seminal sci-fi stories from him. but right now I'm blanking out with them.
Well, and the fact that he was also at one point asked to work on Star Trek as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Did he work on them?
I don't think he did. We'll confirm that later on, but I don't think he did wind up working on it.
Yeah,
I just know that they pulled a lot of inspiration from.
I think I would have heard. Oh, that for sure. That like almost anybody worth their salt post Ray Bradbury is going to pull some inspiration from Ray Bradbury,
right? Absolutely,
on their story because it's just amazing. Right. So more important ones, and we're just going to skip through some of them. Asimov,
Isaac Asimov.
Isaac Asimov. You read him?
Read a little bit, and then also I know Isaac Asimov is like the. I believe he's the one that did the Laws of Robotics as well for science fiction.
iRobot is yes, really good. He
Asimov's
has
Laws. That's what it is.
He has a tetralogy. It used to be a trilogy. Trilogy. Thank you. Yes, a trilogy. I knew how to pronounce that. Once upon a time. But then they added more books, so now it's like a pentalogy. I don't know, but the 3 first ones are really good. I wouldn't recommend the other ones.
So just the first
Foundation. 3. The first 3 from Foundation, I recommend that.
Okay.
He has The End of Eternity, shorter novel about time travel that you would probably appreciate.
Okay.
The End of Eternity. Actually, highly recommend it for you, Bert.
Okay.
Because you like speculative
The
fantasy.
End of Eternity.
Yeah, and you like time travel, so you're going to love that.
I love time travel because it just messes with my head.
Yeah, and Foundation is a little bit more political, historical, science fiction.
Sure.
But I think it's brutal. Like the first 3 ones are just so good. And then iRobot, obviously.
Which is great.
I'm blanking out, but he used to have in Pulp Fiction and Pulp magazines when he started out. He used to have this little Star Traveler, more Flash Gordon-y type guy at the very, very beginning.
Oh, really?
I can't remember his name, and I read those.
Okay.
But that was a long time ago, so I forgot. So anyway, that's Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah,
2001,
absolutely.
Space Odyssey.
Yes.
Read it, watched the Stanley Kubrick movie. Love how Stanley Kubrick reads a book and then decides to just do.
Kubrick's also pretty great, though. I'm just going to side note throw that out there.
He's
Kubrick's
amazing.
also pretty great.
Yeah, but he just pulls it out of his ass. Like he takes a book, he does whatever he wants.
Yeah,
it doesn't do exactly, or he doesn't spell it out. But anyway, so I got through Arthur C. Clarke through Stanley Kubrick. I watched 2001 first.
Yeah.
And then I read some other books that he had. Like there's one about there's some kind of like a bus to the moon. So in the future, the moon is kind of a tourist attraction. So
we're almost there too.
They send these capsules there for people to go see. But then that capsule like gets marooned in space or something, or on the moon. I don't remember.
And then we've got the Lost in Space.
So let's Lost in Space. That's the one I was thinking about earlier when I was talking about R2-D2 being inspired in one of the robots.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was thinking of Lost in Space and the Daleks, obviously.
Danger, Will Robinson.
So right, here's one that you haven't heard of that is really good that you would love. Jack Vance.
Sounds like a music artist.
Well, no, this is a book guy. It's a book science fiction.
Right. I'm just saying, like when I hear that name, like it's got. Like an attitude to it, like Jack Vance.
Yeah, no, this guy has. I can't. Like, I would stay here all day talking about his stories. I'm just going to mention a couple. He has a tetralogy. He has a world, the world of Dustin, I think, or Durstin. Man, I can't remember any of the names now. He has like a whole series about all these different worlds. And there's this one world that's divided into 4. It has like 4
quadrants.
4 quadrants, and it has like different ethnic groups.
Interesting. Okay.
And it has like a really interesting political system with an invisible, an anonymous dictator called the Anon. And we're like, do you remember that movie with Schwarzenegger where they have these little things on the neck that go beep, 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 and they make your head explode if you escape a perimeter?
Yeah.
They took
that was Total Recall.
Yeah, they took that from one of his novels.
Yeah.
So like the Anon, the
Anonymous.
Everybody wears these things. Right. I don't remember what they're called now. Also, but like if you are judged and sentenced, and if you committed a crime, it's punishable. You just make your head explode wherever you are.
Flip a switch and pop the collar.
Yeah. So it's really, really interesting. It's actually a series of 4 books, and it talks about this one guy that lives in this world, and he goes from being this poor motherfucker, and he ends up being the Anon.
Oh,
because when
really?
the Anon dies, he names the next one, and he kind of grows into it. He doesn't even know half of the story, and he doesn't know he's being groomed to it, like doing half of it. And then eventually, when he starts getting older and starts understanding, then the Anon reveals himself to him.
You now. Yeah.
No. First he reveals himself to him, and then he kind of grooms him, and then he becomes the Anon. It's just a really cool, I hardly remember this because I read this like back in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
So I got to brush up on this. But Jack Vance is just huge influence.
Right.
Orson Scott Card, you heard of him?
Yes.
So he is a multiple Nebula Awards winner. He has also a trilogy, The World of Ender.
I have not. I don't think I've heard of that.
So I'm going to, spoiler alert here, okay? I'm going to talk about this guy. So this is, humanity is at war with this alien race. And
Sounds familiar.
They're kind of like ants.
Okay.
They have a queen and stuff, and they just decimate them. So they're just like a very ruthless.
Humans are, or the alien species is?
There's relativity here that's really interesting because the alien species is really ruthless and warrior-like.
Right.
But the humans end up exterminating them. And then they get this guilt that, so there's,
right.
Within the humans, there's a faction that's like really happy that they eliminated them. But then there's also the question of like, you just exterminated a full race.
Yeah, that's full on genocide of a species.
Right. And one of these...
race, actually, in this case.
And the big hero of this war is the big exterminator doesn't realize it's a kid that thinks he's playing a game. Oh, it's called Ender's Game.
I have heard of Ender's Game, yes.
Yeah. And so Ender...
World of Ender, no. Ender's Game, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I had the title wrong. My bad. So Ender's Game. So then he realized that he's responsible for the extermination of an entire galactic race.
Right.
And he just thought he was playing this little game,
Right.
And then it picks up from there. So really interesting.
Which is a really scary concept, the fact that you could... And I know that this has been covered many times since then. But the act of... Yeah, exactly. The act of, like, gamifying war.
Yeah.
And, like, you don't even realize the actual stuff that's going on. Like, for you, it's just some fun game. But what's actually going on is horrific.
Right. Well, one of my brothers, who's ideologically not pro-military at all, he is one of these... he was one of the Spanish national team for this war game. I think it's called American Army, actually. Have you heard of this? There's a war game that was designed by the American Army that then just became a game.
Sure.
And he's so good at it, he played so well that he became part of the national Spanish team for the championships of this. And then he did this psychotechnic test for professional aptitude when he was young. Yeah. And they said he would be really apt for military strategy. Yeah. And he is not, he's not into military at all. He was like, why did I get that? And he kept thinking about it. He's like, oh, you know what? It has to be the skills that I built playing this game. So You're right. Like the whole gamification of war is an interesting, scary ass concept.
It's also a slippery slope.
Very much so. Very much so. So then, so that wraps up some of the authors that we wanted to talk about.
Right. So as far as like the book section, and then a little bit of like tying into films, like that's the first sort of like chunk.
And we may be missing. I know that once
we
finish this episode, we're going to be facepalm and go like, "Why didn't we mention this guy, that guy?" But
I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there already that like just that one. Don't worry, we're covering more stuff. That's just the first topic. So we talked about sort of like the books and a little bit of like the history of where it all came from. Mm-hmm. Another big thing I know that we wanted to cover, because we can't get to everything, is this idea of like series and stuff that we've really appreciated.
Series and movies, that we like.
So stuff that's more of like the visual medium sort of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to call them subcultural references or whatever, but I'm now getting wordy and dumb. So let's go.
Bottom line, shit that we like.
Seminal crap that we like. That resonates with us.
So first and foremost, Battlestar Galactica, which has been, I know it's a big one for me, both the original and the remake of it. Mm-hmm. What about for you? I
just watched the first series, I think it was the 80s, right? Yeah. Because that's the only thing, that was like on after lunch. Yep. So, I don't remember. We had a television
with Starbuck.
It was entertaining.
And Apollo.
Yeah. So I liked it. To me, there were things like, like Space 1999 and stuff like that. They just had, or even Star Trek or Babylon 5. Just the world of it was interesting to me. Yeah. The credits that they paid with credits, the little blasters that they had, the ships, all that stuff. It was more like design production for me than the storyline.
And one thing I really liked about the remake series was the fact that even on the ships, the way they called each other with like this like the old handheld phone grips where they have to like pull it off and it's got like the cord and everything where it's like, I'm calling another portion of the ship. All right, hang it up. And I just thought that was great to like, it's that blending of like old technology, but like these new look and feel. It's a great one.
It's always interesting to see what things get missed from how the world actually evolves versus how technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Cool. Blade Runner is amazing. I hate the second one.
The 2049 or whatever. Yeah.
The beginning of it is so good, and then it just goes into all this stupid, predictable, lame crap. You know, like
what I will say about Blade Runner 2049, the sequel one, is that visually it was amazing. It was a really pretty movie.
Right, but I'm kind of getting tired of that, though.
I'm not.
It's pretty with nothing else. Like, I mean,
with no substance, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, it was very, very, very well done. At the very beginning, I got sucked in. I loved it. And then it just goes on to all this crap. It's just unbelievable, stupid, lame. Just, it takes people for idiots. It's kind of like, you know, it kind of insults people's intelligence. Like the whole Harrison Ford in this little palace listening to Frank Sinatra, you know, with all these wealthy things in the middle of nowhere. I loved the first one.
Yeah, the first one was really, really well done.
Well, one thing that was really interesting when that one came out that was totally different was that everything was Asian.
Right.
That was kind of a futuristic thing that's materializing now, because back then we were like so European-centric and Western-centric. We forgot that the world is Asian, in fact.
Right.
And this one predicted globalization in that way, and that, you know, Asia is much larger than our world. Of course, it's going to seep over into ours, and
and things are going to be like much more prominent from that.
Correct, and the technology. So I love that whole like all the billboards with Asian signs, and just the whole concept of like do androids dream of electric sheep?
Yes,
I mean that's the book. The original book is titled that whole story about,
which is great.
Are they sentient? You know, can we make such an intelligent robot that they become sentient, and it's good to run the blade to terminate them. So all of that stuff I just love that movie. I thought it was influential in so many ways.
And also, big side note, music for both of those films actually is just
what was
amazing.
Evangelist, right? Was the music for Evangelist made the music for
the first one?
For the first one, yeah. Which was, and it's funny too, because the first one also has like idiotic stuff that people have made fun of too, like almost in a cultish way. Yeah. Like the whole enhance feature, you remember enhance?
Zoom and enhance.
Enhance.
Enhance 15 to 23.
All of the graphic designers that I've met after that are like, you know, these stupid clients think we have the enhance function. You know, I think we can make something out of nothing. So anyway, so that there was a lot of interesting old technology that was part of that sci-fi that I think.
Here's another good one. Alien and Aliens, those ones.
Yeah, especially those two.
Scott,
those two are so good.
Yeah, the first two are solid. Aliens 3 is not the worst, but it's not great. And anything after that is just like, ugh.
And I kind of know one of the storyboard artists for Alien 5, actually. You know, he's really good.
Which one was Alien 5?
I didn't even see it.
Because Alien 4, I know was...
I didn't see it. I have to see it.
The one that Josh Whedon directed.
Yeah. I stopped watching after Aliens 3. Aliens 3 is made, I believe, I don't remember the name, but Aliens 3 is made by a director of music clips.
Really?
And it kind of shows.
Yeah.
It kind of shows because it has very visually interesting stuff, but then the storyline isn't that great, you know?
Yeah. But Alien and Aliens are great.
Absolutely.
In fact, I quote Aliens on an almost regular basis.
And the making of is really, really good. And also, and we'll drop this one right now, but the precursor of Alien is the same movie made in college. And I think Peter Turnbull, I don't know which ones of, I don't think it was Ridley Scott, but the writers of Alien did the first one in college as a humorous one. So the alien was actually a ball. It was a beach ball. It was infiltrated in a ship. And that one is out there, and we will put a link in the description. I will find it out because that one's it's also pretty solid.
Yeah.
But it's also a student film. You can tell it's a total student film. Okay. And it's Alien, but instead of horror, which they decided to turn it to that with Eighth Passenger, it's a comedy.
Oh,
So yeah.
that'll be nice.
And it's good sci-fi too. It's a ball. It's just a ball. That,
Yeah. Obviously, Dune.
Dune
Is a big one for both of us.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, we talked at length about it already. But yes.
Yes, and I remember when the actual movie came out, and in Jodorowsky's Dune, if you watch Jodorowsky, because he was like, I hated it that he made it, And I love this scene of Jodorowsky where he's explaining in the movie that he made himself go to watch it in the cinema, and then when he starts watching the movie, he goes like in glee, he goes, "It's a piece of shit." It says, and then he makes a sidebar. This is very much his personality. He's like, it's not a pretty human feeling, but it's a real human feeling. It's like, oh, Joey, this movie's a piece of shit. So it's very pretty to watch, but the De Laurentiis Dune is, by all accounts, not the greatest sci-fi movie. One of the greatest stories. Though.
Yeah, and I will also say as a quick sidebar to that, for those of you that also enjoy video games and play video games, the original Dune video games are also just
very
great.
Yeah,
they're so good.
I've heard their fame. Yeah,
yeah, those are really good.
So another title, Pirx the Pilot, what I was trying to fumble earlier.
Yeah,
from Stanislaw Lem. I've got it on screen now. It's Pirx with an X. And it's that story that I already mentioned that's full of like mathematical tips of the hat and tons of humor. Yeah. Also very recommended.
Star Trek, which we've also kind of touched on just a little bit. Again, because there's like a wealth of stuff that could be covered there. But, Star Trek obviously being a very big and influential piece of like the whole menagerie of science fiction.
Yeah. A lot of really interesting the ethnias that Star Trek's come up with are just
the fact that
fascinating.
Klingon is a recognized language now that people can speak.
And I see in Star Trek, I see a lot of influence from Flash Gordon with that too.
Absolutely,
Flash Gordon has a lot of that. So that's really good. Red Dwarf, which
we got this thing right
here today. The Red Dwarf is. I will quickly talk about it. We just have so many mentions that we're trying to go quick. The Red Dwarf is a series from the BBC back when the BBC was cooler. It's super good. It's really good science fiction and a comedy.
I mean, they still have Doctor Who, so I will give them that.
Oh, yeah, Doctor Who's awesome.
Yeah.
But let me go real quick. And the original, well, no, that's Channel 4 in Britain. It wasn't BBC. I was going to say Black Mirror. Red Dwarf, I'm going to do a spoiler alert here just to entice people into watching it because it's an older series. So some people don't like to watch old television because it's not that glossy, but this is a great story. It's a series about It's a spaceship that's as big as a planet, and it contains the inhabitants of Earth, which Earth is doomed and is it's disappeared. So they all put all of humanity into this huge planet, Death Star looking.
Yeah, I'm about to say very Death Star-esque.
Right. And they hibernate everybody until the ship reaches millennia from whenever it gets launched. It reaches an inhabitable planet. So the ship is being controlled by a robot. But the entire humanity is hibernated, and they only have technology to wake up one or two of them or something like that. So,
which I'm sure this whole thing sounds very familiar for a lot of different stories people know.
Yes, and so the premise of this is that in this series, there's 4 characters. One of them is the ship robot that controls the ship. The other one is a measly worker that got woken up. I don't know why he's woken up. He's one of the. He's like a plumber or something. He's like no one.
Like ship maintenance
he's just
or sort of thing.
Yeah, ship maintenance. And he's awake. I don't know why, but he's the only one that can be awake. Like they can't wake anybody else up. Then there's a hologram. They have holograms of everybody that has died, just to remember them. And they're just a person with an H in their forehead. And because there's only power to have one hologram powered up, this guy has hidden all of the other hologram keys so that only he can be. Because of course the worker wants to relive some of the hot chicks or something, but this dweeb with the H on his forehead. And then the 4th character finally is somebody that evolved from a cat that was in one of the dungeons in the ship. So just like we evolved from monkeys, so many millions of years have passed that this guy has evolved from a cat.
Okay, so makes sense to me.
He's like a human, but he licks his butt, and he does like all these cat things.
He's humanoid, yeah.
He's humanoid, but he licks himself, and he does cat things. So he's kind of selfish like a cat. So it's really funny.
Wait, does he look like a human though, or does he have like the characteristics?
He looks like a human. He looks like a human, but he has like little, fangs and little things
and like little slits of eyes and everything. everything too.
Yeah. He's but he's very much he's a hedonist. You know, he's very much into himself, and it's really funny. And then every episode is one wink or another to physical subgenres on
just different sci-fi. Yeah.
So, for example, one of them is that they go into a parallel universe. So they find another red dwarf, a parallel red dwarf. So they're like looking forward to contacting them because they're thinking they find the opposite of each other.
Yeah.
So they know that in this parallel world, the robot tells them there's an opposite of you on that ship. So the guy knows there's a chick. So he's like looking forward to meeting the chick that is parallel to him. So the chick also wants to meet him because they want to have intercourse because they're both like of the same mind.
Right.
So the cat guy is expecting the same. He's expecting a female. But he sees a guy that's evolved from the dogs.
Which is,
who's a kind of a Hell's Angel biker kind of thing. So he's really disappointed. It's just really, really funny because like they all get like female counterparts except the cat. So there's another planet which is a prison planet where the only punishment is whatever crime. You can't commit anything illegal or any crime because when you try to do it, it happens to you.
Oh.
So if I try to burn your butt, like a flame appears in my butt, you know. So it's so funny, so ingenious, and so good that I just recommend everybody to watch it. So thanks for letting me explain.
Absolutely, but it's a big one.
It is a big one.
And then Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is just a huge one. Also, worlds and.
I mean, that's very, like, you know, crew on a ship going to explore stuff. Like, it's very much of that genre. So if you appreciate that sort of like team exploration sort of thing, Babylon 5's another.
And there's also ethnias and like it reminds me a lot of Star Trek in a way.
Right.
To me. It was kind of like punky Star Trek to me a little bit, you know, because there's all kinds of different extraterrestrial forms and cultures, and I always enjoy that.
Well, and if you like that, just a quick nod to that as well. Another one I would want to mention real quick is Farscape. Yeah. Because Farscape is another great example of that one. Mm-hmm. And that one was frelling awesome and spoke to me a lot.
I see what you did there. So this time it didn't go over my head.
But yeah, so then we got Westworld.
Westworld is awesome.
Both the original and the new HBO series they just made. Yep. I enjoyed both of those. Yeah,
I like the HBO one. Sometimes it gets a little bit slow for me, but I've been able to follow it. I love both of them, really, actually. And both of them have holes, too, but, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
The premises are amazing.
But the cool thing about the original one is I remember watching the original Westworld with my dad.
With Yul Brynner.
Yeah. But with my dad on VHS because it was something he really enjoyed. And when it first starts off, I'm like, oh, here we go. Another Western movie my dad's watching. And then it's like out of nowhere, very quickly, it's like left turn. And I'm like, ooh, what is this?
Such a good movie. And it's funny, too, because like Westworld, when I watched Terminator for the first time, and I saw Terminator in the theater. Yeah. And it was one of those movies that you're not expecting, you know, we just weren't going to go there and...
You know, like, yeah, this will be whatever.
Yeah, we're just going to go stoned and laugh at Arnold Schwarzenegger because we had done that with Conan the Barbarian, which is stupid.
Those movies are so good, though.
They're stupid ass.
No. They're stupid good.
No, but they're... They're movies to watch stoned. We just giggled like schoolgirls. It was so funny. And then Terminator 1 turned out to be a lot better than what we thought.
Yeah.
You know, it's really good. But Terminator 1, I remember when I watched it, reminded me of Westworld.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah,
you know,
I can see that.
So there's things about the cyborg that reminded me a lot about that.
Yeah.
So, what else we got?
Stargate.
Stargate is good.
This is a big one. That was one of the things that really got me. That was one of the biggest ones for me just because it was something my dad and I shared all of the time. Okay. So like the first series, Stargate SG-1, like first of all, he showed me the movie. We watched the movie together. And then it was during the time they started airing the television show. And so that was like our thing to get to watch together. It was we would go and watch Stargate together. So that was a big one for me.
Yeah. No, that was that's one of those where to me it was like the first half and then the second half lost me.
Sure.
But I love the production design.
Yeah.
I just get into those things, you know.
Yeah.
So I stopped following the narratives that much, but I did like the production design. I liked how they did the whole thing where like they insinuate that the Egyptian-looking
that they were just like actually aliens. Yeah.
Like you love that stuff.
Which ties into ancient astronaut theory.
Everything we don't know about comes from outer space. So I love that part of it. Yeah. So
they actually later on down the series, I think it was towards the tail end of SG-1. So spoiler alert for anyone else out there that hasn't watched it and wants to. But they also acknowledge that like the Norse gods were a different type of alien.
Oh yeah.
And so that's why they weren't the same type of aliens as like the Egyptian guys. They were whole different aliens, and they actually look like the Greys that we know in modern day stuff. So
there's a lot of mythology and science fiction meetings that make sense and that are fun. It's fun correlations to make.
Exactly.
So and Ancient Aliens is one of them. So here's another one, Solaris. Have you?
Yeah, I've seen the movie of Solaris.
Which one?
The more recent one.
Okay, George Clooney, I think it is. George Clooney.
Yeah.
So there's one prior. That's a Stanislaw Lem one.
Oh, so I have actually.
Yes.
Okay. So I didn't know that I had heard of it.
It's not as humorous. It's a very, very slow movie, and it's really hard to get.
It's really good, though.
It is really good, but it's kind of hard to get where it's coming from, And it does have humor, but it's not ha-ha humor.
No.
It's more like, look at what idiots we are. Us humans are a bunch of morons.
Right. It's definitely...
It's kind of like that.
Self-reflective sort of humor stuff.
Very, very well put, yes.
Yeah.
And it's also, the original one was made by Andrei Tarkovsky, who's a Russian filmmaker.
Okay.
And Russian filmmakers, many of them are the opposite of American filmmakers and North American filmmakers, where they drag the shit out. Like they're just slower.
Yeah.
Slower. So it's definitely something to watch in a certain mood.
Sure.
Otherwise, it
that makes
becomes
sense.
too slow to watch, I think. And finally, in this list, we have The World of Durdane, which is the other word I was fumbling for before when I was talking about Jack Vance. Durdane. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't know.
I get all these names like Durd and Fern and Thurn and Fern. I just get them all mixed up in my head. So Durdane is the tetralogy I was talking to you about.
Okay.
With Anon and all that stuff. So we already talked about that.
Yeah, but definitely... Go check it out.
Yes. And if you're into reading, now that I have to wear glasses, I don't read as much because it's more uncomfortable. But I got to get back into it. I want to reread all of them because it was so good.
Right.
So, yeah.
One thing I wanted to kind of jump back to, because we had alluded to this, talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but I wanted to come back to it because I know there's a lot of really great references within that, but it's like this whole dystopian future.
Yeah. We can't leave that out. That's amazing.
Right. And I know that Blade Runner kind of also goes that way too.
Yes.
But there's some also really good stuff, and even some more modern stuff that I think is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Black Mirror, for example.
Black Mirror is good until it becomes Netflix. I'm sorry to be that guy, but I'm going to say it. Like, it becomes The Outer Limits when Netflix bought it. And so I don't mind The Outer Limits.
Yeah.
I like it. But it pisses me the fuck off because the first 3 seasons of Black Mirror are definitely a criticism to where we're headed as humans. And now all of a sudden Netflix gets it, and now it's all like just fun escapism. And so I'm going to say this. I don't mind fun escapism. I've been a fan of The Outer Limits.
Yeah.
And I could become a fan of Black Mirror after Netflix bought it. But it's really hard for me now because I just see how milquetoast that's been decaffeinated. And that just angers me.
Right.
So I'm going to mention Black Mirror, how brilliant the first 3 seasons are, like how many things we can question about where we're headed with our technology and with our devolution of society in terms of, becoming more corporatist than human focused, all that stuff. I'm just going to leave it out there, but I'm going to make the recommendation of, if you're interested in any of this, watch the 2nd episode of season 1 of Black Mirror.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Episode 2 and 3 of season 1.
Those are solid. Those are really solid episodes.
Watch those 2. I'm not going to get into more detail. I'm not going to do any spoilers.
No, just go watch it.
Yeah, just watch that. And then there's others, like the one we talked about, the one where they gamify war.
Yep.
There's one of those where like everybody crowdsources punishment on people. Like there's all these different. The episode of the likes.
Oh my god!
Where you rate everyone.
That one is so relevant to today. It's not even.
All
funny.
of them are.
I know.
One of them.
But like that one, hits me. Right. Constantly.
But 1,000 Million Merits, the guys that live in their cube that have to pay with credits, and then they get ads in their cube walls.
Yep.
They can't, if you don't have payment, if you run out of credits,
you're forced to watch it. Yeah,
you're forced to watch the whole everything in that world in that episode. Again, that's the only spoiler I'm going to make. It's just so good.
So good.
Definitely. Good. Thanks for bringing that up because it's a high mention.
Right.
In our notable mentions that we should make.
Yeah.
And then the next one, of course, is
1984.
1984 by...
Is it 1984 yet?
George Orwell. I read 1984 and 1983, and I remember a girl in my class said, "Oh, did you just read it?" Because everybody had read it earlier. And I was like, yeah. And she said, isn't it good to know that we're not there? And I'm like, and I looked at her and I went like, what do you mean we're not there? And we're definitely getting there. We're getting there.
Right.
That's a topic for another episode. But 1984 is something highly recommended reading.
Yep.
Again, written by George Orwell, who was a journalist who fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Yep.
Against the fascists.
Right.
Who wrote several novels warning about it. First, he wrote a nonfiction called An Homage to Catalonia.
Yeah.
Based on his experience in the Civil War. Highly recommended. Animal Farm, a political dystopian fantasy.
Yep.
Highly recommended too. And finally, 1984, super scary. I read it. I think there's a band now called Do It to Julia. But this phrase, do it to Julia, still puts my hairs on end on my skin. I'm going to drop it right there. He named it 1984, just an anecdotal thing that I want to sprinkle this with. Did you know why he named it 1984?
Because it was published in 1984?
No, because he wrote it in 1948, so he just switched.
Oh. Well, now I look like an idiot.
So, no, you don't. I wasn't trying to make you look like... No, but the point of that story...
Now I look like a fool.
Okay, 1984, he wrote it because it was 1948, and the point of that is that a lot of the people that tend to try to take the date literally...
Yeah.
And I've known those idiots in person. Like, well, 1984 came and went, and nothing of that happened. That was just a fictional date. He was just, I'm going to put a date up in the future.
Like super arbitrary.
Yeah, it just meant the future. That's what he meant to say with that.
Right.
And he just picked up 1948, which is when he wrote it, and he flipped it around. And the horrible thing, and I'm not proud of this at all, is that he actually is right, and we're getting there.
Yeah.
And we're going to drop that here. But great fucking novel, good movie.
Yeah.
Better novel, highly recommended.
Right. And then another reference that we can make in this whole like dystopian section would be one that we've talked about again earlier was THX.
THX
from George Lucas.
Yes, which you would enjoy so much.
Right. So that's definitely on my list of things that I need to watch for sure.
Yeah, future society, love is kind of, sex is prohibited, or it's just done through surrogates, and they have like this weird religion. So good. Really, really good. The other one, District 9, I love that one.
Oh, District 9 is so good.
Do you know the backstory?
Of District 9?
Yeah.
No, but I'm sure you'll tell me.
Why don't you describe the premise first for our listeners, and I'll tell you the backstory, which you're going to love.
Well, okay, so here's a quick question for you then. When I'm talking about District 9, do you want me to talk about the movie? Because I watched the movie.
Yes.
So the whole idea of District 9, like the premise of it, so spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, first of all, go watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The director of it is the director of some of my favorite movies that I watch on repeat all the time. Mm-hmm. But District 9 is this whole premise of like an alien species essentially coming to visit Earth and then getting stranded. And so now we have to sort of like foster them and allow them space to like live, but we build them almost like this ghetto.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're living in the ghetto with an apartheid system.
Right.
And this has been shot in South Africa, by the way, too.
Absolutely.
So
it takes place in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Which has already got kind of a shaky reputation. And then they just do this, and then it's just basically this junkyard
it's a Soweto,
that we put a wall around.
It's a Soweto for aliens. And it's kind of that premise. So it's really interesting. It's a very interesting premise, and it's a really interesting narrative, and it's very well told, I think.
Yeah, and it's just this great take on humanity and how humanity would potentially deal with that situation where it's like, oh, well, you're not from Earth, so you're not worthy of like all of the same civil rights that we have.
With all the ugliness of humanity too, and all the contradictory things.
And obviously there's a lot of like tips to other stuff going on, but it's just a great film.
It's a great metaphor, and it also talks about degeneration, like the alien form also degenerates too. Like so they it's like sentient beings have ways of degenerating, and they have virtue and defect, and I think it was really interesting. Here's the backstory that you're really, really gonna like. So a team of people went to South Africa to shoot a movie based on a game. I don't remember what video game.
Okay.
And they ran out of dough. And so they got stranded there, the whole team of special effects and, there's
everyone,
camera guys, all of them were stranded there. Now we got to go back. Like, we wasted all this money getting here. And so they had a meeting. There was like, what if we pull out funding together and we make another movie? Since we're here, might as well. And they made District 9.
Oh, that's right. Because they were going to go there to film Halo.
Yeah, I didn't
the
know
Halo film.
Yeah.
And that's why if you, anyone who is a Halo fan, if you look at a lot of the weaponry, they're basically Halo weapons.
See, that's
and then for the second part of it, they just like slap some other stuff on because it can't be a Halo weapon, obviously,
right.
but it looks like you can obviously tell, oh, well, we've got all this stuff, so why don't we do this instead?
Right. And that's the part that I love. So I didn't know, I don't know Halo, so I didn't know that reference.
Yeah.
But that's the part that I love, how like they just pulled their research and they were like, fuck it, we're here.
Yeah, yeah.
What say you if we just come up
I didn't know that was the actual reason. I thought they just said, well, since we can't do it, we're going to give a big FU and film this other movie, and we're going to use some of the props that we were going to use for Halo.
That's what happened. So maybe it wasn't that they were running out of dough. There was something.
Or something like that. I don't know.
That they couldn't do it because they had a licensing problem or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, there was an issue. But
they got there to make a movie. The big producer pulled out or something.
Yeah.
And then they were stranded.
Yep.
And then they were like, well, fuck it, let's make something out of it.
Yep.
And they made this great movie.
Yeah,
so
which is great. I love District 9.
Yeah, me too.
It's the same director that also did Chappie. And Chappie is one of my favorite movies ever.
I like Chappie. So same thing there too. Like, sentient beings are capable of being corrupt, just like human beings. So human beings are corruptible, but so are aliens, and so are the robots.
Exactly.
They can become idiots, or they can.
Doesn't matter who it is.
They can be nice, or they can, Another one is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
I don't know if I've seen that.
Oh, highly recommended. Like,
if it's on this list, I'm sure it's highly recommended.
Really quick premise, spoiler alert. The future, everybody is genetically engineered.
Okay.
So and you've heard of this, what I'm about to say, you've heard of this for sure. So there's, the society is divided in classes depending on how they've engineered you. The alphas are the good-looking, super smart. Betas are also not that good-looking, but good-looking, smart. Gammas are like office managers, mediocre people.
Yeah.
And the epsilons are like the working class, and they just live on this drug called Soma.
Okay.
So this guy is an alpha. He gets a little bit too much alcohol in one of his test tubes or something when he was growing up. So he is short and not that good looking. But he's an alpha plus. He's called Bernard. So because of that...
Of course his name is Bernard.
So because of that, he starts questioning the shit. That's it.
Okay.
Go watch it. Really good. Fantastic.
Just go watch it. Okay.
Yeah. And they have they have sex games for the kids when they grow up. So it's a really different society.
Whoa.
So instead of Georgie Porgy, remember Georgie Porgy putting in pilot?
Oh, yeah.
They have Orgy Porgy. And so all kinds of interesting...
Wait, did they have one for Ring Around the Rosie?
Wacko stuff. I don't remember. Watch it.
Because that one's super dark.
Sorry, not watch it. Read it. That is a book. They've tried to make shows with that, not succeeded.
Okay.
Haven't succeeded very much. They had a
So if anything of that, go read it.
It's a quick read too. It's not that big.
Okay.
So there's that. Gattaca.
I don't actually know if I've seen that one. I know I've heard of it, and I know I've like seen the cover and I know of it, but I don't think I've ever.
I'm not gonna give too much as a mention. Another one about genetical engineering in the future.
Would that be like Surrogates then?
Surrogates is our next one. Not exactly. So Surrogates is not genetical engineering though. Surrogates is cyborg.
Well, so I've seen it two different ways. I mean, the actual story, yes, is cyborgs, but it's still like I've seen it another one where it's like genetic engineering clones of yourself, where then you just have like a chip implanted in the clone, and you pilot the drone because it's a surrogate. But
that's not the surrogate I was talking about. They're like cyborgs,
right?
And then you're just in a seat, and you're just at home, and you're surrogate. So everybody lives in a surrogate.
Didn't they do a movie with Bruce Willis?
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. That's the one I'm talking about. And it's not a 5-star.
It's decent.
But it's cool. Yeah, no, it's watchable. Yeah. So that's a good premise for me.
It's another one where, spoiler alert, Bruce Willis gets to be an action star essentially for a little bit.
Yeah. He has a scene where he has to do the Yeah. So that's that one.
That's a good one.
Fahrenheit 451, which we talk about.
Yeah, we have covered that one already. But again, go check that out. Read the book. There's a new movie with Michael B. Jordan that just came out not too long ago. So yeah, highly recommended finding that in some sort of format.
Yep. Sorry, I'm going to jump back to surrogates really quick, though. So the important thing I think of surrogates that we see today is the whole avatar, the whole living through social media where there's a better version of you.
Right. You're inventing this better version.
You don't want to deal. You don't want to be honest about who you really are. You just that. So I just want to mention
profiles. Anyone?
Boom. So, Children of Men.
Oh, fantastic! Such a good movie.
Really good. Highly recommended.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm going to not say anything else.
No.
Really good.
You shouldn't. Aside from just go watch it.
Yes, go watch it. And then finally, Elysium is the one.
Same. Again, same director of District 9,
District 9, yeah.
and Chappie.
Yeah. Some people told me that movie sucks. I don't agree.
No, I think it's great.
I really liked it. Yeah.
Again, big inspirations from Halo in that one as well.
Oh, really?
Like the whole the world, or like the Elysium thing.
Okay,
it's
so
like the big Halo world thing.
Halo has taken that. So I don't know anything about Halo, but Halo has taken that.
They grabbed that from.
Halo has taken that from shit that happened in the 70s.
Oh, of course,
So
yeah.
There's illustrations, there's novels in the 70s about that.
Right. The ring world, essentially, that we create for ourselves.
Yeah, well, no, it's these in orbit with solar panel things.
Yeah.
There's just an Elysium. Some of them are cylinders and not rings. That's why I'm.
Right.
If I find an illustration, I'll put it up on screen back from the day. So, but that's our list of dystopian science fiction seminal stuff that resonates.
It's just
with
so
us.
good. That's like when we were trying to go through this and make this podcast, we're like, all right, we just want to cover off on the things that are just really big and important ones to us, and we can't even do justice to the things that we want.
But it's hard too, because we were also talking about, we don't want to do that podcast mistake about hey, no one gives a shit about what you and your friends think,
Right.
Which is really what this podcast is. But,
that's literally the premise of this podcast.
But no, the premise of this podcast, I'm going to say it on this one, on science fiction episode, I think the premise of this podcast is general knowledge for dummies.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so for sure.
And we're going to put it, now we talk about it, I think we should put it somewhere. But what Bert and I were trying to do with this is, we love this genre. We wanted to go over it. We wanted to see if there was a way that we could, in one episode, go over the high points, the highlights of it, and kind of cover it.
Right. And I don't know if many of you have picked up on this. I'm sure some of you have throughout this episode. But how many times we alluded to some of our past episodes, because science fiction permeates us so thoroughly that it was able to have nods even in the slightest bits to a lot of the other things that we've talked about throughout the season so far up to this point. And I'm sure we'll continue to do so as we continue. But
it's right. It's true.
If anyone else picked that up, there was a lot of references we were like, into this one, into this one. And is it 1984 yet? And just little tiny tips of the hat everywhere.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
It just goes to show how important it is to both of us that it so deeply permeates even how we communicate with each other.
True. Well, yeah, it's definitely permeated our culture, our entire culture growing up. Right. And so there it is. And also what's interesting too, another common denominator of this podcast is our age difference. The fact that we're friends beyond a couple of generations of age difference.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable, I think, is that we do have a very, very similar tie to science fiction.
Yeah.
The similarities are more in taste than they are in generational difference. There's some generational similarities, but on the whole, there seems to be a lot of, and we have a cultural separation in countries we've grown up in.
Right, but we still are gravitate
we have that
towards
nexus. A nexus. See, and not back to etymology and to Blade Runner. So we have that nexus of that where we meet. Yeah. So.
Somewhere along the line, there was a glitch in the Matrix, and it made it so that we had similar interests in everything.
So, yeah, we should probably send this episode off with an argument. I fell asleep 3 times trying to watch The Matrix.
So did I.
Oh!
The first time.
Oh, wow! Yeah, I still have friends with whom I coincide in taste that tell me The Matrix is a great movie. I don't agree.
Coincidentally, I thought the animated Matrix series post-Matrix movies was actually much better than the Matrix movies themselves.
Sometimes that happens.
Well, because they got to spend a little more time thinking about the story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
sometimes that happens, yeah. Cool. So I think we made it.
I think we finally got to at least our list. And so, again, disclaimer, we couldn't get to everything, but let us know. Because these are the things that we really enjoy.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you care? Do you not give a shit? Let us know.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. And until next time,
stay out of prison
and walk in the shade.